Hello, I'm Dom Lapeer. I'm here with Professor Derby.
Hello.
Sorry. But like you were just saying, if you could elaborate more on the religious anthropology aspect of that.
So, when I went to grad school, I was deciding whether to go for philosophy, religious studies, or culture anthropology. And I thought, okay, philosophy, I'll probably end up committing suicide because I'll think myself into it. Religious studies I really like because I'm kind of drawn to the question of why humans are religious and what it does for humans. But then I knew I could do that also in culture anthropology. So I decided to do the very more hands-on thing, culture anthropology. So I spent actually a couple semesters in India. That was my area study. And I went there to study spirit possession, people possessed by spirits, which is a very popular thing. Not popular, it's a very common thing across humanity. And I know it happened in India. So I went there to study that, in particular to look at children who were possessed, like 7, 8, 9 years old, which seemed to me, what's going on? And in India, you're possessed either by what they call bhoots and prets, which are kind of evil spirits, or kind of divine beings, like gods, could even be a dead relative or something. And I studied that for a while. I've always been interested in humans' experiences of other, like beyond human, what we'll call transhuman things, which include gods, spirits, and experiences. In particular, I have a class that I love. It was called Anthropology of Religion. It has a slightly different name right now. I think it's called Culture, Religion, and Alternative Experiences, which is more descriptive. And my approach to that class, and really what I've been interested in, is what are human beings trying to get out of these understandings or experiences? And I have a perspective on that. I think that I'll draw a distinction between what I'll call religion as an institution and religiousness as a journey. And the religions as institutions all started as journeys. So if you look at Buddha, for example, or Jesus or somebody, they were on a quest to understand and find a path to whatever that answer is. And then what happens is it's a path that works for them, other people buy into it, all of a sudden they start religions and institutions. And I think when it's an institution, it can be a path, but it also loses its individuality. So I think individuals and humans they want to experience what I'll call ecstasy, or an ecstatic experience, which is something outside of themselves, which also, if you look at the definition of ecstasy, it means standing outside of yourself and communing with others. So even if you go to the drug ecstasy, that's how people describe it. You go into a crowd, you're in an altered state, and you have this great communal feeling. I think humans want to experience that, and across humanity, they've done it in different ways. Whether it's through what I'll call shutting down, which you do in prayer and meditation, and through that you can find a path to a communal experience, or you can do it by overstimulating the being. Things like raves, or going to rock shows, or even, a lot of cultures do it through drugs, where they take them to what Jim Morrison rightly said, break on through to the other side. And I think humans have a seeking of that because of the human condition, which is that we have the ability to not just think about an experience, but then to judge that experience. I think this is what separates humans from other thinking sentient beings. We think it and then we judge it. And we have the tremendous ability to justify then what we judge as thinking. But humans, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Are you familiar with the mysteries of Ulysses? The Greeks used to take the Soma and then watch the plays, and then that was like a rite of passage for them.
Exactly. And that's pretty common in cultures, where they have something, whether it's a sweat lodge. For native cultures, they go in, they fast, they go through this experience, they go out into the desert where they find, their reason for being. Or like other cultures where they do hallucinogens to get and break on through. Or, Buddhist prayer or Christian deep, prayer and meditation. These are all paths to transcend this complicated stuff, to transcend what others have called the profane reality of day-to-day living. We get up, we eat, we go to school, right? We brush our teeth, and day-to-day living has all kinds of problems. Things happen. There's conflict. It's just profane. If you look up the word, it means just ordinary, daily stuff. But humans, I think, there's this other aspect that they call the profane and the sacred, and here I'm talking Masei Eliade, one of the great religion scholars, and also William James, who did a lot of work on that, saying that humans kind of have this need to, because they can imagine perfection, even though it's not day-to-day life, it's something that they want to experience because it gives you a feeling of communal understanding, comfort, and authentic experience, which is difficult to describe and explain. It's what called something that's beyond language to really explain. But if you look across history at the mystics or the great religious leaders or even, rock and roll stars or others, I think they have that experience. And I just think there's a seeking for humans to do that, to kind of what I call heal the divide that we feel. Mm-hmm. And it's hard, I can't do this in 20 minutes because this is a full semester. Yeah. And I've spent my whole life thinking about
studying it for years.
Stuff, just because it intrigues me.
Yeah.
Absolutely intrigues me. That, and then, why? Why do humans spend so much energy trying to do that stuff rather than just going to work and
staying in the
profane? Yeah. Exactly. We spend, in fact, an inordinate amount of time searching or journeying for things.
Do you think that in regards to maybe not worship, but people, because I notice a lot of, like we were previously discussing before the first recording, the conflicts over religion. Like we learned in class the Armenian genocide, right, which was, Christians being oppressed by Muslims, and now we have the situation over there in Israel. Do you think that the pleasing, or like the pursuit of pleasing their gods and what they think their gods' goal are, typically ends up in conflict, or do you think it ends up in peace more, or do you think it because to me it seems like it typically ends up in genocide and death?
So I spent a little time in a Zen monastery, not a lot of time. Just as an undergraduate, we created a philosophy club and we went to stay in a Zen monastery. And we had a session with the head of the monastery, and one of the questions I asked was similar to that. It's like, why is there so much violence and conflict in these religions? And he said, well, it's what he called the stink of Zen. And now we'll go back to the institution. When people just live for the institution and the continuance of a religion for the sake of it, without understanding the journey part of it, they're willing to die for that belief because it's so ingrained in their being. It's so much part of their identity that they're going to fight to do that. And it's hard, again, it's a little hard to describe, but if you've ever known anybody who is like a zealot religious person, who really just, you have to believe they're a way or no way. that's when it becomes so much part of your being that you can't think outside that box anymore. As we talked about in social, they want to trap us in that box, and you have to be able to think outside. So I think the conflict between religions comes because it ties in with politics. Religion, politics, and economics, they get tied in together as institutions. And then they become a societal way that you want to sustain your society. But the conflict is because basically they have different stories. They just have different stories, or what we call in anthropology worldviews of how they understand the world. And people every day harm one another because they believe different stories.
Mm. I had a question about, like you mentioned, the bots. Do you believe on a general broad scale, the 350 million, whatever, Americans, do you believe that they're mostly stuck in the box? Or do you think people are becoming more socially aware, or do you think it's shrinking? Because I've noticed with, especially the 2024 election, a lot of our political state and a lot of our social state is now being equated to and being worked in with Christianity.
Right.
And that's their basis, and that's now becoming the logic for legislation in our government. We have to please God. We have to support Israel because it says this, and Ted Cruz, we got to support Israel because it says this in the Bible.
Right. That's our lineage. I would answer the question this way. We've always had and haven't had a diverse society at the same time. And I say that because we obviously have diversity here. People are either chosen to immigrate here or were brought here against their will, or subjugated here by the higher power. So there's always been what's called a dominant culture. And that dominant culture in American society has been and continues to be white, wealth, male, Christian, heterosexual. So that is what's called dominant culture. Even though it may not be the dominant in the number of people, it's the powerful that have more say in what our society looks like, or what they want our society to look like.
Apologies for the abrupt pause. We had some technical difficulties during the filming of this episode.
Ask the question, do most people buy into it? Again, I'm going to answer it this way. I think we're in two boxes now. And this is both a problem and I think maybe a solution. I'm not sure. I'm worried because people are either hunkering down into that box of the dominant culture, the rebirth of, we're a Christian nation, and, we know that side. And I'll be frank, I'm not in that box. And then we have the other box, which tends to embrace diversity and have more of what we'll call a liberal. And liberal just means you want to change to make things better, as opposed to a conservative understanding, which says, well, things were better in the past, so we ought to go back to that. So I'm fearful of what's going on because we've created two boxes that don't really talk to each other very well, if at all. And you can see it right now. Our government's shut down and literally not talking to one another. At the same time, maybe there's a solution to that, in that perhaps we need to rethink the way we structure our administration or our government. And governments really are just there to administrate, to keep society going, hopefully in a positive way. And I've heard talk lately about people, and I'm seeing it, that maybe these two boxes, there's more than that. Maybe there's other parties or other political or other answers to that, which, by the way, you guys are going to have to come up with, because we're already set in our boxes, to break those walls into boxes.
No pressure. No pressure, guys.
It's a lot of pressure because these are huge problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only here, but we're kind of seeing it worldwide. that I think we're kind of at a tipping point here where we need to figure out how a different way of thinking about how we're going to organize people in a world where people can get information instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to decipher the information, whether it's accurate, true, complete lies, or just something that I want to think.
Like you said that people typically just choose their ideologies off of their institution, off of their belief system. And I know this is a dicey thing to bring up, but I'm going to. The Israel situation with the IDF occupation of Gaza City and the West Bank and the settlers moving in and kicking people out. And I noticed that many people I speak to about this issue, because I'm very passionate about it. It's really unfortunate what's going on. They don't seem to know what's going on. They seem to know that one side is Jewish and fair-skinned, and the other is Muslims with dark skin, and they seem to know who Donald Trump supports, and I don't want to just make it a Trump thing, because they seem to know who their politician aligns with. And then when I get into it, and when I use words like Hamas, when I use words like Zionism versus Judaism, when we, use terms like Nakba, Palestine, when you bring up since 1948, when you get into it all, people don't seem to really get to be educated on these issues.
Right.
And it seems like you said, they're just aligning with the institution, even when the result is 50,000 dead children.
Yeah. So there's a term sociologists use a lot called hegemony. And hegemony is when you buy into that particular box and don't question it anymore. It just becomes part of your being. So again, I think it's the powerful within those boxes, they kind of resonate with people, and then they're just like, okay, that's the answer. And there's a certain comfort in thinking you know an answer rather than trying to understand the complexity of what's really going on. And you need to go back way before 1948 to get the complexities of that part of the world. There has been conflict there for centuries. Religious conflicts, ethnic conflicts, social, racial conflicts have been going on. They're fighting about, talking about getting locked into a box. They're fighting about whose homeland it is. Who has the right to a homeland? Because that's where my religion started. Well, this is my opinion. A religion is not a place. Religion is a system of thinking, and most of those, in fact, I'm going to say, all of those systems of thinking have valid, positive things. And if you really look comparatively, and everybody should take comparative religion class, usually not that far apart. Usually, as they have a saying in India, there's one truth but many paths to it. And the different paths to those things. And once you start looking at them, they really don't differ that much. But again, people getting caught in those institutions, in those boxes. I would say that most people feel more comfortable in a box than they do trying to figure out the difficulty of the realities of things. And then I think you need to look at it in the bigger picture of most people, vast majority of people, really just want to live a peaceful life and make a living and have a family and do those things. But sometimes you get caught up in these conflicts.
I know we're running out of time, and this might be I'd hate to make you simplify this question, but do you think, or how do you feel, because I noticed this, the weaponization of the boxes, especially with what I noticed, Israel wants people to conflate Zionism and Judaism, and Netanyahu gets on television, and I don't know the exact numbers. I do know many Jews and Jews I've spoken to have identified as Zionist, and I noticed that's something that repeats in history is the weaponization of the boxes to get to those means.
Right. That's because, again, you're talking, if you go and look at, again, the complexity of Israel, there are very different sides and political sides vying for, what should happen there. And I think, again, you're looking at Netanyahu and that kind of, I'm even going to call him, maybe not even the majority of people, this is just the powerful who have an interest in what's going on, because it's not just their Jewishness, it's also economics. These are powerful, rich, and government control that aspect of the government, and they're just trying to keep their privilege. The powerful don't like to give up power because they're privileged from it, and others are trying to survive too and make a life. But I don't know if I want to. I wouldn't say that, because it sounds like it always happens that once someone becomes powerful, they kind of fall into negative stuff. I don't think that's true. It's not true.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So if I look at some things, but it has happened, and it is happening today. And getting back to your question, that's another fear I have, is that I think it appears, because people are feeling threatened, it appears that they're willing to weaponize their box.
Do you see that in the U.S. as well? And
Certainly.
And because I noticed it's some of those things that seems almost universal, or is universal. Every continent has it to some degree. Every country, every religion.
Yeah, I don't think every country or every religion. So if I look at like Tibetan Buddhism, they're just about compassion and peace.
That's fair.
You don't really hear it, and I think there's a lot of that. But what we see, because it's a big part of American culture, is very militaristic, and always has been. And if you look at our holidays, half of them are military holidays. And, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does say something about how we perceive the world and our position in it, and how we win. And winning's such a big part of our cultural worldview, too. And you can see it. And it disturbs me that we're going to send National Guard to cities. That's weaponizing the government. It disturbs me that, as of I think yesterday, in order to be a journalist in the Pentagon, you had to sign a form saying you would only print what they tell you can print. That's not free speech. That's not the freedom of the press, journalists to do their job. And that really concerns me, because that is weaponizing against our own society, which is a problem, in my opinion.
Do you see they all left the Pentagon? A lot of them
Yes.
They all packed.
They almost all left.
Even Fox News, which
Fox
really,
News.
I thought if anyone would have stayed, I thought it would have been Fox. No,
Me too.
Fox, they packed their bags. Everyone left.
Yeah.
I was happy to see that, though. I was so happy to see them just leave.
Yeah.
I was nervous that people were going to sign it.
Some people did. I was surprised too, because I heard that on the way in this morning, that Fox had also left. And those who are left are just in line with that perspective. And they're only going to print them what they want to hear. Yeah, these are problems, because now our system has to work on the ability to have differences of opinion peacefully and constructively, and the ability to make choices.
You bring up opinion, then. What is your stance, then? How did you feel about the situation with Charlie Kirk being assassinated, and how that all kind of unfolded? Because it was, I would say, a historical event, the way it happened for our country, and the things that resulted from it.
I think the way it's been represented as an historical event, I have to be honest, I had never heard of him before that. I didn't know much about him. What I have heard, and again, I don't know that much, I didn't like what he was saying. But killing is not the answer. Killing is just going to create a martyr, which I think it's maybe doing, and making people hunker down more to that, because now they've created the other, they've created an enemy. And again, that's just putting greater walls on that box, those boxes that we have.
100%. It is 11:47. I think I've bled your time pretty dry. Thank you so much, seriously.